They never said his name out loud after it happened, not in Sedalia, not in Missouri, not in the decades that followed, because Elias Grey wasn't just a boy. He was a silence people learned to fear, 8 years old, no family left, no place to belong. They said he looked like any other child, blonde hair, sunburned skin, polite voice, but the eyes were wrong. They weren't a child's eyes. They were still, watching, like he wasn't looking at you, but through you. He stepped off that stagecoach in the summer of 1867. No bags, no escort, just a folded piece of paper with the name of a farm that no longer exists. They gave him a room, they gave him chores, but they didn't understand what they'd invited into their lives. People think evil shouts, but Elias was quiet, and that made him worse. Animals wouldn't go near him, children avoided him. He didn't cry, he didn't laugh. He just watched, listened, waited. The first time someone died, they said it was an accident. The second, bad luck. By the third, even the sheriff wouldn't come near the property. They tried calling doctors. One arrived, Dr. Samuel Harding. He took one look at Elias, didn't run tests, didn't ask questions. He just left and wrote in his journal, "The boy is not ill, the boy is not human." And after that, the record goes dark. But we found what they buried. We pulled it from sealed boxes and burnt pages. And if you're still listening, it means part of you is ready to know what Elias Grey really was, why science refused to touch him, and why, to this day, his name still makes the animals howl when the sun goes down. The farm where Elias stayed was called Mill Hollow, but no one calls it that anymore, because there's nothing left to name, no house, no barn, just blackened soil and silence. 3 people lived there before he arrived, George and Eliza Miller and their daughter June. They took him in without question, said the boy, looked tired, said he needed a home. But within 2 weeks, their livestock stopped eating. The milk turned sour. The dogs refused to enter the house. Eliza wrote to her sister, said Elias never made a sound at night, never snored, never shifted, just stared at the ceiling. Till morning. George said he caught Elias once, outside at 2 in the morning, barefoot, standing in the field, talking to something in the dark. But there was no one there, just wind, and that strange buzzing sound that made the horses panic. Then came the fire. No lightning, no storm, just a flash in the sky, and by morning the house was gone. No footprints, no bodies. Nothing left except the barn wall, where a single phrase was written in coal. They saw too much. The sheriff refused to file a report, said it must have been bandits, but no one in town believed it, because bandits don't leave writing, and bandits don't make the birds fall silent for miles. And Elias, he was seen again, a week later, 12 miles east, carrying the same cloth bag, wearing the same clothes, not a single burn on him. He knocked on a door, asked for water, said his name was Timothy now, said his uncle had died in the fire. The family that took him in didn't ask questions. By then, the story was starting to spread. People were whispering, saying the boy brought bad luck, saying the boy was cursed. But curse isn't the word. Curse is something you inherit. Elias wasn't cursed. He was the curse. The next family was the Pattersons, simple folks, kept to themselves, big on rules, big on faith. They believed in hard work and second chances. So when Elias showed up at their porch with his pale face and empty eyes, they said yes. They let him in. For the first week, everything seemed fine. The boy did his chores, ate quietly, spoke only when spoken to. Eliza Patterson said he was polite, said he never raised his voice, never misbehaved. But she also said the house felt colder when he was inside, even with the stove burning, even in July. Her husband Samuel said Elias stared too long, said the boy would stand behind him, just watching, not blinking, like he was waiting for something to happen. And then the animals started acting strange. The rooster stopped crowing. The cows backed away when Elias entered the barn, and the family dog, a mutt they'd raised since it was a pup, refused to go near him. Cried at night, scratched the door, until it bled. One morning, they found the dog dead under the porch. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just frozen stiff, mouth open, eyes wide. That's when Eliza wrote a letter to the town doctor, begged him to come, said something was wrong with the boy, said he talked in his sleep. But the words weren't in English. Said she heard him whispering. In a voice that didn't sound like a child, Dr. Harding arrived the next day. But before he could examine Elias, Samuel Patterson was found in the field, face down, eyes burned white, hands twisted like he'd seen something he wasn't meant to understand. They buried him that evening, quietly, quickly. Eliza said nothing to the doctor, just handed him the letter she never sent. At the bottom it read, "He is not ours. He is not lost. He is watching something older than time, and it's watching back through him." After the funeral, Elias didn't cry, didn't ask questions, didn't even blink when they lowered Samuel's body into the ground. He just stood beside Eliza, quiet, still, like the whole thing had nothing to do with him. The doctor stayed the night, slept in the front room, said he wanted to observe the boy, see for himself. But around midnight, he left the house, didn't say goodbye, didn't take his things, just walked out into the dark. Eliza found his satchel by the door. Inside were notes, drawings, pages torn from his journal. The last entry was short, barely legible, scrawled in a shaking hand. It said, "The boy is listening when no one speaks. He responds to thoughts, not words. He is a gate, and something is knocking." No one saw Dr. Harding again. 3 days later, Eliza packed her things and left. She didn't sell the farm. She didn't tell the neighbors. She just vanished. And Elias, he was alone again. By the 5th morning, smoke was rising from the Patterson chimney. Even though no one was home, when they sent someone to check, the house was empty, but clean, every room scrubbed, every window open, and in the center of the living room floor, drawn in chalk, a perfect circle. Inside it, one word, observe. By then, the sheriff stopped taking reports, said people were stirring up nonsense, said the war left folks damaged, delusional, but one man believed it. A preacher, old and half-blind, he said Elias wasn't a boy, said the body was a disguise, and the soul inside it was something that used to walk before the flood. He said it was older than Scripture, older than men, said if Elias ever looks at you and smiles, it's already too late. They laughed at him. Of course they did. But no one could explain the fires, or the missing animals, or the dreams, because by now whole families were dreaming of a pale child, standing at the foot of their beds, smiling, waiting. The dreams spread like rot, not nightmares, no screams, just stillness, stillness with eyes. They all described the same thing, a pale boy standing beside their bed, not moving, not speaking, just watching. And when they woke, he was still there, for a moment, and then gone. One man said, Elias was inside his house when he opened his eyes, said he hadn't heard a door, hadn't heard a step, but the boy was standing in the hallway with his hand on the wall, mouthing something silently, like he was counting bricks. Another said he saw Elias out in the fields before dawn, not walking, not working, just staring straight up at the sky. Mouth open, no sound coming out, like he was waiting for something to arrive. A local midwife said her newborn daughter wouldn't stop crying when Elias was near, and when she finally calmed the child, the baby was looking past her, eyes locked on a corner of the room where no one stood, and the baby smiled. That's when people stopped saying his name. They stopped calling him Elias, they called him the Grey, or just the boy, like naming it gave it power, like they all knew he didn't belong to anything human. Then came the drawings. Children started sketching things no one taught them. Circles, eyes without faces, houses upside down, and always, always, a figure with no shadow, standing just outside the window, watching. The schoolhouse closed. The preacher left town. People packed wagons in the middle of the night, said nothing. Just drove off, left tools behind, crops in the ground. Because something had settled over Sedalia, something cold and patient and ancient. And at the center of it was a boy who never grew taller, never aged, never changed, and still. He smiled. They say the land around him changed, that it twisted, bent in ways no one could see, but everyone could feel. Cattle wandered in circles. Wells ran dry overnight. Birds flew in patterns that didn't make sense. Perfect loops, like they were caught in a loop they couldn't break. And people? They started forgetting things, important things. Birthdays, family names, the way back home, like the town itself was unraveling. One memory at a time, a man named Harold Finch went to chop firewood, took his axe, told his wife he'd be back in an hour. They found him 3 days later, barefoot, kneeling in the middle of the road, staring at nothing, whispering the same word over and over. Blue, blue, blue. He never spoke again. Another woman, Mrs. Keller, locked herself in the cellar, wouldn't come out. Said the sky was watching. Said the trees had grown ears. When they finally broke down the door, she was gone. No footprints, no broken locks, just her shoes and a child's drawing tacked to the wall. It showed her house, split in two, and a figure standing between the pieces, smiling. Every time something happened, Elias was near, always silent, never blamed. Because how do you accuse a child of undoing the laws of nature? And here's the part no one wants to hear because it sounds impossible, sounds wrong. But some people started to like him, not love, not affection, something deeper, worse, like he made them feel understood. Like he saw them, knew what they wanted to hide. And once he knew, they stopped fighting it. They let the darkness in because Elias didn't come to destroy the town. He came to invite it. There was a boy named Caleb Downs, 10 years old, strong for his age, sharp mind, quiet eyes. He wasn't afraid of Elias, said the other kids were stupid, said it was just a story, said he didn't believe in curses, so he followed him, watched where he went, tracked his patterns, said Elias always walked in perfect lines, never wandered, never got lost, even in the woods, even at night. One evening, Caleb didn't come home. His father searched, his brothers searched, half the town searched, but it was Elias who found him. Said he saw something shining in the creek. Said it was Caleb's belt buckle. Said he followed the trail and found the boy in the water. Face down. Cold Dr. Harding's replacement. A young man named Ellis Vaughan wrote that Caleb hadn't drowned. There was no water in the lungs, no bruises, no wounds, just a stopped heart, like something inside him had simply shut off. They buried Caleb under a willow, and Elias placed a flower on the grave, a white violet, out of season, out of place. When asked where he found it, he just smiled. That night Caleb's mother went missing. Her bed was empty, front door wide open, no signs of struggle, no tracks, just a trail of those same white violets leading into the woods and ending at nothing. Some said Elias was touched. Some said he was cursed, but a few, a very quiet few, started saying something else. They said he was sent, not from heaven, not from hell, but from somewhere older, something that remembers when men still crawled in the dirt, something that doesn't care what we call evil, because it's bigger than evil, it just is. And Elias was its shadow. By autumn the town had changed, not just in fear but in structure. Shutters stayed closed, church bells stopped ringing, people whispered less, prayed less, looked at each other like strangers. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't empty, it was full, like something was listening from beneath the ground. Children stopped playing outdoors. The laughter disappeared. The air itself felt thicker, like the land was holding its breath, waiting. And Elias, he thrived in it. He walked through that silence like it was his own. No hesitation, no confusion. Like he'd always lived in a world without sound. He'd show up in places he shouldn't. Barns with locked doors, Attics no one opened. Basements where people heard scratching at night. He was never caught, never questioned, because no one wanted to see him up close. Then came the drawings again. But this time, it wasn't children, it was grown men, waking in the night, hands smeared with charcoal, walls covered in shapes they didn't understand. One man drew a spiral, 20 feet wide. On the floor of his own barn, when asked why, he said, "I dreamed it, and it needed to be real." He burned his own house down the next day, and through all of this, Elias just watched. Sometimes he helped carry firewood. Sometimes he helped feed chickens. Sometimes he just stood by the well, looking down into the dark, as if something was calling to him, or through him. By now, people weren't asking if he was dangerous. They were asking, what happens if he leaves? Because deep down, they knew. He wasn't the source, he was the signal, and whatever was watching from the other side was getting closer. The preacher came back one final time, not to save but to warn. His face was sunken, his hair gone white. He walked with a limp that wasn't there before. Said he'd seen something in the southern hills, said he found the old stones, and they whispered back. He didn't ask where Elias was, he already knew. He stood in the town square, eyes wide, hands trembling, said the boy is not alone, said he is an opening, and something is learning through him. People gathered, but they didn't mock him this time. Not anymore. Too much had happened. Too many things they couldn't explain. He said Elias was the mirror, but not the reflection. Said the real face was still behind the glass, looking in, waiting for the right kind of mind to open wide. Then he held up a book, old, rotting, wrapped in cloth. Said he pulled it from the earth, and it spoke in dreams. He begged them, "Don't let the boy leave town. Don't let him pass through the fields after dusk, because once he walks out, he carries it with him." They didn't stop him, didn't chase him. They let him scream, and then Elias stepped forward, small, thin, hands behind his back. He looked up at the old man, and he smiled. The preacher dropped the book, fell to his knees, and started weeping. He said, "It knows. I looked. It knows. I saw. It's in me now. He died that night. No wounds, no poison, just silence. He laid down on the church floor, face turned to the ceiling, eyes open wide, and every candle in the building went out at once. That's when they finally understood. Elias didn't bring the darkness. He let it remember how to walk. After the preacher died, no one rang the church bell again. The pews turned to dust in weeks, the altar cracked straight down the center, and the Bible left behind. Every page went blank. The town stopped talking, not out of fear, but out of knowing. Something had already moved in, and language couldn't push it out. They say Elias didn't eat anymore, didn't sleep, didn't blink, unless someone else did, like he was copying, mimicking the motions of being human, but not understanding why. He'd stand outside the schoolhouse, not speaking, just watching. And inside, the children would cry for no reason, draw the same spiral again and again. Some even carved it into desks, into their arms. One boy, Thomas Ray, walked home barefoot in the snow. Didn't feel the cold, didn't speak for 4 days, then whispered something in his sleep. He's not the one. He's just the key. The next morning, he was gone. His window still locked, no tracks outside, just a perfect circle of ash beneath his bed. People tried to leave, wagons packed, routes planned, but the wheels split, the animals refused to move, and worst of all, they started forgetting where the roads went. One man, a hunter, walked north with a compass and a map, said he'd find the way out. They found him 3 weeks later, standing in the same spot he left from, starved, muttering about lights beneath the soil. And Elias, he never changed, never looked older, never looked tired, just present, Like gravity worked differently around him, like time obeyed him, instead of the other way around. That's when the whispers started, from the woods, from the wells, from the floorboards at night. Not words, not sounds, but something deeper, like a thought that wasn't yours, and a memory you never lived. And now I ask you to go deeper with me. But first, if you're still here, type the phrase, "He knows me." Type it twice in the comments to lock in your awareness and show the algorithm you're waking up. The dreams changed after that. No more visions of Elias beside the bed, no more watching. Now he was inside the dreams, speaking, but the words weren't in any known tongue. Not Latin, not Greek, not even the dead languages the scholars feared. It sounded like wind over stone, like roots twisting underground. And when you woke, you remembered, not the words, but the meaning. It was always the same. Open. Let it through. Some tried to resist, stayed awake for days, boarded windows, filled rooms with salt, lit candles until the wax ran dry. But it didn't matter, because it wasn't about the boy anymore. It was about what he carried, the thing that used his face, used his silence, used his stillness like a veil, and the veil was thinning. One woman, Rachel Dole, woke in the middle of the night, found her hands buried in the dirt behind her house. She'd been digging with her fingers, both nails gone. No memory of how she got there, and when her husband asked what she was looking for, she said, "Not what, who?" The next morning, Elias walked past their house, and every window cracked from the inside. Another man, James Croft, an old Civil War veteran, kept a Bible in every room, spoke prayers under his breath, like he was chewing on them. He nailed crosses to every wall, and still. He heard Elias humming outside his window. He shot himself a week later, but not before carving a message into the floorboards beneath his bed. It said, "I saw it through him, and it saw me back." And that's when people started disappearing without a trace. No blood, no struggle, just absence, like they were ideas that had been erased from reality. And Elias, he just kept walking, from house to house, like he was checking something, waiting for the right moment. And that moment was getting close. There's a story they don't put in the archives, not in libraries, not in dusty county records, only passed through whispers, only told when no one else is listening. They say Elias stopped at a schoolhouse once, just before it closed for good. No classes that day, just one teacher, and 6 children, finishing lessons, sweeping floors, reading scripture aloud. Elias wasn't enrolled there. No one invited him in, but he walked through the front door like it belonged to him. The teacher, Miss Lorna Griggs, asked what he needed, asked why he'd come, and he just pointed at the clock on the wall, said, "It's time, that's all." The clock stopped ticking. The air turned heavy. One child fainted. Another began coughing up river water. No one had been near the river for days. The children were sent home early. Miss Griggs stayed behind. She was seen standing at the blackboard, writing with her fingers. Even though there was chalk in her hand, the board didn't show words. It showed symbols, shifting, moving, like they were alive. She didn't leave the building that night, and by morning there was no building left. Where the school had been, only scorched grass remained, as if it had never been there at all. They found Miss Griggs' shoes, neatly placed at the edge of the field. Inside one was a folded note, written in perfect cursive. It said, "He opens doors, but not all doors lead out." After that, the children who had been in the school stopped speaking entirely. Every one of them, silent, eyes glassy, smiles too wide. And when one of the mothers tried to pull her child back to the world, the girl whispered something for the first time in weeks. "It's under the floor now, waiting for your voice to unlock it." Elias never returned to that field, because he didn't need to. The place had already changed. It wasn't a school anymore. It was a wound. By the end of winter, there were less than 40 people left in Sedalia. No one counted out loud, but they all knew the number, like it was carved into the sky above them. The land stopped responding. Farms wouldn't grow. Chickens laid eggs without yolks. Water turned to sludge, and yet the wells looked clean. The seeds looked healthy. But the life was gone, drained, like the soil had been asked to forget how to nourish. And Elias, he walked those dead fields, barefoot, hands behind his back, like he was waiting for something to bloom that no one else could see. People started hearing music at night. Not from houses, not from instruments, from beneath, low, metallic, like chains dragging across stone, like something ancient shifting in sleep. A boy named Micah woke screaming, said he saw roots growing through his walls, said they moved when he looked away, said they whispered names he didn't recognize, but somehow still feared. He stopped eating, sat in the corner of his room, tracing spirals into the dust, one after another, until the whole floor was covered. Then he vanished. Not at night, not in secret. Middle of the afternoon, his mother turned her back, turned around again. Gone. The only thing left was his final spiral. But this time, in the center, was a name. Elias. That same afternoon, a letter arrived, no stamps, no address, just left on the preacher's broken podium. Inside was a map, drawn in ash and something darker. It showed Sedalia, but not as it was, as it had been. Hundreds of years ago, before names, before towns, before time could be measured, and at the center of that map, beneath a symbol no man recognized, a single word burned into the parchment: return. That night, every mirror in town cracked, exactly down the middle, and Elias smiled again. They say every place has a beginning, but Sedalia wasn't built on land, it was built on forgetting. The town founders didn't clear the forest, they covered it, paved over a place that already had a name, but not one in any language men were meant to speak. And now it remembered. The map from the letter marked a hill just west of town, a hill no one ever named, because no one ever climbed it. Animals avoided it, rain refused to fall there. Even the wind went silent at its peak. But on the day after the mirrors broke, Elias walked straight to it. No coat, no shoes, like he'd done it before. Many times, like he'd only been waiting for the invitation. And when he reached the top, he sat. That's all. No lightning, no flames. Just a boy sitting cross-legged in the frost, staring at nothing. Or maybe everything. They say the clouds above that hill never moved again, that even in spring, snow clung to the grass like it couldn't let go. A hunter tried to follow him, climbed halfway up, then turned back screaming, eyes bleeding, mouth repeating the same phrase over and over. He's not watching it, he's becoming it. No one else tried to climb after that. Instead, people started hearing the same sound in their heads, every morning, just before waking, a deep hum. Not loud, but vast, like the beginning of thunder that never arrives. It shook their bones, but left their ears untouched. A sound not meant to be heard, but remembered. One by one, people left food at the base of the hill. Candles, books, personal items, as if he were a god, or something worse, something older than gods, something that gods once feared. And every night the offerings vanished, but Elias never left the top. The last time someone touched Elias was a woman named Miriam Holt, midwife, widow, feared nothing. She climbed the hill at dawn, carried a Bible in one hand, a lantern in the other, said she wasn't afraid of boys, said she wasn't afraid of devils, said if the town was dying, she'd look it in the eye before it swallowed her. She reached the top, found him sitting, just like they'd said. Still, barefoot, eyes open, but not blinking. She knelt beside him, placed her hand on his shoulder, and whispered a prayer into his ear. No one heard what she said. No one ever would, because when she came down the hill, she was silent, eyes pale, voice gone. She wandered to her home, laid in bed, and died with her hands folded, smiling like someone who'd seen the end, and accepted it. They buried her in the churchyard, but the grass never grew there again, not even moss, just dry soil, and an echo that didn't belong. After that, no one went near Elias, not even to look, because now they knew. He wasn't waiting for instructions. He was waiting for memory, waiting for the land, the air, the minds of men to remember what he truly was. And the land did remember. Birds flew lower. Wolves circled the town's edge but never entered. Even fire refused to burn in some places. The forge went cold. The oil lamps flickered. The stars above Sedalia stopped matching the sky seen from anywhere else. Astronomers noticed, briefly, wrote it off as refraction. But they were wrong. The stars hadn't moved. The town had, and Elias still never aged, still never slept, still watched like a clock, like a gate, like the last breath before something steps through. By spring, the ground itself began to hum. Not loud, not violent, but constant, like breath beneath the soil, or a voice beneath language, vibrating in every floorboard, every wall, every bone. Elias had not spoken in months, had not blinked, had not moved, but people began to dream in circles, not images, not stories, just movement, patterns folding inward, over and over, until all things led back to one place, the hill. They say one man, a deaf carpenter named Luther Briggs, felt the vibration so clearly. He began carving, days without food, nights without sleep. He filled every surface of his home with symbols. No two alike. Not random, but organized. He said he didn't know what they meant. But his hands did. Said it felt like remembering. One wall in particular. He refused to carve. Left it blank. Painted it white. Hung a mirror in its center. The morning after he finished, he was found sitting in front of that wall, hands folded, eyes wide, heart stopped, and in the mirror, a second reflection stood behind him. But no one else was in the room. That mirror cracked a day later, top to bottom, but not like glass breaks. It bent, like something had pushed from the other side. After that, mirrors were banned in Sedalia, burned, shattered, buried deep, because they weren't reflecting anymore. They were remembering, and what they remembered looked like Elias, and yet it wasn't him, not entirely. He was still the vessel, still the lock, still the eye of the storm, but the storm was learning to walk, and the boundary was thinning. No one saw it arrive. There was no lightning, no earthquake, no screams in the sky, just stillness, wider than silence, deeper than dark. It began with the dogs. The few that remained stopped barking, stopped eating, just sat, faced the hill, and waited. Then came the wind, not loud, but wrong. It moved in pulses, inhaled when it should have exhaled, bent trees toward the town, like the forest was leaning in, listening. And that's when the marks began appearing. On barns, on doors, on skin, shapes no one could draw on purpose, not circles, not symbols, but impressions, like the memory of pressure, like the echo of hands that had never touched you, and in the middle of every mark, a dot, small, black, endless. They say a boy named Jonah woke up with one on his chest, said it burned cold like ice inside the bone. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just whispered 3 words to his mother, "It's inside now." She ran, took him, tried to leave Sedalia in the night. She made it 10 miles before her wagon tipped into a ravine that wasn't there on any map. Jonah survived, unharmed, climbed back into town before dawn, smiling, didn't say another word for the rest of his life. And the dot on his chest began to spin, not physically, but perceptually. Anyone who looked at it felt motion, like being pulled forward, like time was folding around it. Even the old doctor, who'd seen every kind of wound, refused to examine it twice. He said, "That isn't a mark, that's an opening." And Elias still sat on the hill, unmoving. But now, his shadow grew longer before sunrise and shorter at midnight, as if he wasn't obeying the sun anymore. No one remembers the exact night it happened, not because it was unclear, but because it erased the ability to mark time. Watches stopped. Candles wouldn't burn. The rooster never crowed. The morning just didn't come. It stayed night for 16 hours straight, moon locked overhead like an eye that refused to close. And in that dark, the dot on Jonah's chest pulsed once. That's all it took. Doors unlocked by themselves. Books opened to pages no one wrote. The wind spoke in tones that bypassed the ear and went straight into the spine, and at the center of town, a shape began to form, not built, not summoned, just remembered. A structure, black, but not dark, tall, but not high. It bent light around it, bent sound, bent thought. People looked at it and forgot their own names. One man stood too long and began speaking in reverse, every word, even his own prayers. Backward, like his mouth had been turned inside out, his wife begged him to stop, but he kept repeating one phrase over and over, even backward, even broken. Everyone understood it, he said. It's watching through us, not at us, through us, like we were glass, like our minds were just windows, and something on the other side was pressing its face to the pane. And Elias, still on the hill, blinked once, the first time in months, and when he did, every tree in Sedalia leaned toward the structure, like it was gravity. Jonah collapsed. The spinning dot on his chest faded and left behind only skin. But when they looked closely, his heartbeat was gone. Not stopped. Gone. No pulse, no rhythm. No sound. But he stood, he breathed, he smiled and said, "It chose." That was when they realized. Elias wasn't the final step. He was just the door handle. They called it the black frame, the thing that appeared in the center of town, where nothing had been, where no one had built, but everyone had dreamt of. It had no roof, no floor, just vertical beams, like ribs, like the skeleton of a house that had never been whole. But inside it was pressure, like standing beneath deep water, like the moment before a scream, held in forever. And the space inside it didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. 3 men stepped inside, carpenters, fathers, men who had buried their sons months before. They didn't speak, didn't pray. They just entered, as if drawn. Only one returned. His eyes were white, his ears bleeding, his voice gone. He drew one thing in the dirt, over and over. A door, within a door, within a door. Then he carved a phrase into the barn wall before hanging himself. 6 words burned into the wood like prophecy. It's not here to enter, it's here to invite. That night, the ground cracked beneath the structure, and a hum rose, low, mechanical, but alive, like a throat, like a mechanism that had been buried too long, now turning itself back on. And from that moment, Elias began to stand, not quickly, not all at once, but over hours, rising from the frost-covered hilltop as if gravity had changed its mind. When he reached his feet, the moon flickered, and across Sedalia, every mirror, even the ones that had been hidden or buried, reflected his face, even the ones facing away from the hill, because it wasn't Elias anymore. Not entirely. It was the memory of Elias, reconstructed, refined, possessed by pattern, carrying not a spirit, but a system. And once systems awaken, they do not sleep again. They thought it wanted bodies, souls, children. They were wrong. It wanted language. It wanted memory. It wanted architecture of the mind, because when a thing waits long enough, it forgets how to manifest. It needs blueprints, structures, hosts who can carry shape before meaning, emotion before form. And Elias, he was the first pattern it fit into, but not the only one. That's why the drawings kept appearing, why the children stopped speaking, why the adults started waking up with words burned into their skin. It was building, from the inside out, not a church, not a machine, not a creature, but an invitation. And Sedalia was the signature on the envelope. The boy Jonah, whose heart never returned, began speaking in dual voices, layered, like two versions of himself, one living, one rehearsed. He walked the town without blinking, touching walls, touching doors, touching people. And wherever he touched, things changed. Wood turned soft, metal rusted in seconds. People forgot who they were looking at mid-sentence. Even their own names felt unfamiliar when spoken aloud. The mayor tried to declare a state of emergency, but forgot the word emergency halfway through his speech, stood at the podium, mouth open, no sound. Then he collapsed and dissolved into black salt, right there on the church steps. Elias walked into town that evening, for the first time since the hill. No one stopped him. No one could. He moved like gravity bowed to him now, like time paused with each step, like the town was waiting for him to finish the sentence it had started centuries ago. He walked into the black frame and smiled once. Every lantern in town lit at once, even the ones that had no oil, even the ones that no longer existed. And through the firelight, the townspeople heard one phrase, not with ears but with memory. "You were never meant to forget me." The phrase echoed for days, not outside but inside. Men would speak it without realizing. Mothers would whisper it in sleep. Children drew it in the dirt with sticks they didn't remember picking up. "You were never meant to forget me." It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder, like a letter from a past life, written in your own handwriting, signed by a hand you'd never seen. That's when the photographs changed. Old portraits in attics, family albums, even daguerreotypes buried in trunks beneath floorboards. They all changed, not suddenly but slowly. Subtly, eyes began to shift, postures stiffened, smiles faded into smirks, and in every photo, in the background, a boy began to appear. Never in focus, never centered, but always present, Elias, or what had become him. And if you looked long enough, the background changed too. Walls became darker, sky turned black. Hands reached around doorframes that weren't supposed to be there. A man named Royce burned every photo in his house, then gouged out his eyes with a fireplace poker, said he didn't want to see what was already inside him. He lived 3 more days, whispering coordinates that didn't match any map, not of Earth, not of stars. And when he died, his shadow remained on the wall behind him, charred, fixed, and smiling, because the thing inside Elias wasn't content with being seen. It needed to be remembered. It needed its image carried, like a contagion, like a prayer with no God to receive it. It wasn't haunting the town, it was restoring it, back to an older shape, one buried beneath history, beneath names, beneath the lie of civilization and the people. They didn't resist anymore, because something in their blood, something in their sleep, said this was always going to happen. This wasn't possession. This was recognition. Recognition is more dangerous than belief, because belief can be broken, but recognition lives in the marrow. And that's what Sedalia became. Not a town, not a place, a recognition site. The black frame pulsed now, not light, not sound, but concept. It radiated the memory of itself, and people stopped aging. Not forever, just paused, like time wasn't counting anymore. Elias walked the perimeter daily, every footstep measured, every gaze precise. He was conducting something, but not music, not ritual, something older than both. One night, a woman saw him walking backwards through her field, eyes closed, mouth moving, not speaking, but breathing words she couldn't hear. And where he walked, the corn turned black, then dissolved into dust. That same night, 3 more people vanished, their homes left open, chairs still warm, food still steaming, no signs of struggle, only a spiral drawn in oil on the floorboards, every spiral matched perfectly. No matter who drew it, no matter where it appeared, mathematicians would later try to study the pattern and lose their sanity within days. Not from fear, but from understanding, one wrote in his journal before disappearing. It's not a symbol. It's a message in motion, a seed of architecture, a place trying to grow through us. And through it all, Elias watched. He didn't need to speak, because the town was now his voice, the buildings his grammar, the streets his breath, the people his punctuation, and the sentence being written. It wasn't for the world. It was for something else, watching through the seams of time, waiting for enough pieces to align so it could finish reading. And once it finished reading, it would begin speaking. And once it spoke, there would be no more forgetting, only remembering. Forever. The message wasn't carved, it wasn't whispered, it wasn't heard, it was felt. All at once, across Sedalia, every window fogged from the inside, every clock turned backward, every name forgotten. And then the voice began. Not Elias, not human. It came from under the town, from inside the hill, from beneath the black frame. But it didn't echo, because it wasn't sound. It moved through the air like an infection. It rewrote memory, rewrote identity. It didn't need permission. It only needed presence. And the first words it spoke were not in a language anyone recognized, but everyone understood. We gave you shape, and you gave us sleep. Now you will give us selves. Every person dropped to their knees, not from fear, but from alignment, like the words had snapped something into place. And then they smiled, not wide, not forced, but natural, like finally waking from a dream you didn't know you were in. The preacher began to laugh, quiet, joyful, then walked into the woods and never returned. A child took ashes from her fireplace and began drawing doorways on every house, not entrances, exits, because something was coming through, something that wasn't meant to arrive, so much as be recalled. This wasn't an invasion, it was a reunion. Sedalia had never been human, not fully, not purely. It had always been a convergence point, a rehearsal, a seedbed. And Elias? He was the echo of the first man who opened his mind wide enough to remember the truth, that we are not alone, we were never alone. And the voices in the dark aren't visitors, they're ancestors, waiting to be reborn through thought. They remembered the first agreement, not written, not spoken, but etched into breath itself, a pact made when thought was still liquid, when shape was borrowed. When flesh was just an experiment in holding memory, the people of Sedalia weren't just remembering the past, they were reactivating it. And the black frame. It wasn't a building, it was a memory chamber, a container for forgotten oaths. One by one, the people began to gather around it nightly, not out of fear, but out of instinct. They stood in perfect silence, in perfect formation, as if some part of them had been trained long ago to remember their place in the pattern. Even the children moved in rhythm, without cue, without instruction. Their footsteps echoed in multiples, like they were being mimicked by something beneath the ground or above the air. And when Elias stepped into the center of the black frame, the wind didn't blow, the trees didn't move. But every person, every man, every woman, every child They wept, not from sorrow, but from release, as if something ancient in them had been clenched for generations and finally let go, and in the stillness the voice returned. But now it used their own mouths, not possession, not control, but collaboration. Every voice spoke as one. The breath of the forgotten returns. The house of remembrance opens. The womb of thought bears shape again. We are not gods. We are not demons. We are the sentence that was never allowed to finish. And with those words, the ground beneath Sedalia cracked, not wide, not fast, but exact. A perfect spiral, cutting the land open like a key in a lock that had waited 1,000 years. And what rose from beneath did not walk, did not crawl. It simply arrived, not to destroy, but to correct. It rose without fanfare, without flame, without sound, just presence, a shape made of memory, of old math, of dreams we forgot how to name. Not creature, not machine, not God, something built from meaning itself, wearing the skin of logic, but radiating the weight of something older than physics. It hovered above the spiral, not casting shadow, but eating it, unmaking light wherever it passed. And all across Sedalia, people stopped being people, not vanished, not transformed, but translated. You looked into their faces and saw echoes, reflections of other times, other forms, as if the town had been unzipped and the previous versions of everyone were leaking through. One man looked into a mirror and saw himself, as stone, as fire, as insect, as thought. He screamed until his reflection turned away from him, and then he forgot his name. Elias stood beneath the rising shape, head tilted back, arms open, and every person in Sedalia repeated 3 words in perfect synchrony. We are ready. Not shouted, not sung, spoken like a passphrase, like the final line of an ancient prayer. The shape pulsed once, and the sky above fractured. No thunder, just division, as if the illusion of the sky had worn thin, and something truer pushed through, colors no one had seen before, geometries that bent inward while unfolding, things that shouldn't coexist, now layered on top of one another. And time stuttered. Men saw their own deaths and survived them. Children drew their unborn grandchildren in the dirt, with impossible accuracy. One woman aged 30 years in a breath, then became young again, but kept the wisdom, because what had risen wasn't just fixing Sedalia, it was recalibrating reality, reinstalling something that had been deleted from memory, from history, from the DNA of mankind. And Elias smiled again, this time not with lips, but with the entire town. The seals weren't locks, they were filters, barriers placed not to keep something out, but to keep you from seeing clearly. And in Sedalia, they broke one by one. The first seal was time. It dissolved like mist, clocks melted, calendars reversed, and people began remembering things they hadn't lived. A boy woke up crying in Latin. An old woman whispered star maps into her tea. A blind man painted a perfect diagram of the hill, with lines that pulsed under candlelight. The second seal was language, words unraveled, new ones emerged, old ones returned. They didn't speak them, they felt them, like vibrations in the teeth, like truth under the tongue. One man wrote a phrase in blood on his barn wall. We were once their thoughts, now we are their mouths. And then came the third seal. Identity. Names became soft, faces blurred in mirrors, not deformed, not erased, just flexible. As if the idea of being one thing had always been a lie, Elias now walked in 3 directions at once, occupying space like breath fills lungs, not bound to place or body or moment. He entered the black frame again, but this time He did not stop at the center. He kept walking, straight down into the spiral, into the mouth of the risen shape, into the system that had waited for his return, and the people followed. Not with feet, but with self, their minds bent inward, their egos shattered politely, like teacups placed gently on the floor before being stepped on. And when they were all inside, the structure closed. Not like a door, but like a thought being completed. And for the first time in Sedalia's history, there was silence. True silence. The kind you feel in the bones, the kind that speaks louder than any scream. And in that silence, a new hum began. Not from the earth, but from within. The hum wasn't sound, it was agreement, a resonance shared by every mind, every cell, every shadow that had ever touched the soil of Sedalia. It said, "We remember now, not a memory of events, but of identity, of alignment." The people were no longer people. They were functions, instruments, living architecture built to hold a pattern too vast for any one shape. And Elias, he was no longer central because he had never been separate. He was the first note, now echoed by thousands, and the pattern they formed, the alignment of breath, of will, of thought, it created something that wasn't made of flesh or brick or history. It was made of recognition itself, and it had a name, but not one that could be spoken, only understood. Some called it the other memory. Some called it the mouth before the word. But what it truly was simple. The correction, the reinsertion of a forgotten principle, a foundational truth hidden beneath time. That mankind was never meant to rule this reality, only to carry it, like a choir carries sound. And Sedalia was the first city to remember the melody. That's why the town vanished, not disappeared, but ascended, translated out of linear space, carried upward, inward, elsewhere. And those who tried to visit afterward found only silence, empty fields, no structures, no names, just a lingering frequency, barely audible, but heavy enough to stop the heart if listened to too long. A warning, or perhaps an invitation. Because what happened in Sedalia wasn't isolated. It was a test, a prototype, a rehearsal, and the spiral has begun to appear elsewhere, in drawings, in dreams, on skin. So if you've seen it, if you've heard the hum, you already know what comes next. This is the final truth, and once you hear it, there's no returning to sleep. There was never one Sedalia, never one Elias, never one spiral. They are templates placed like seeds across the timeline. Patterns waiting for attention, waiting for alignment. Some in 1867, some now, some not yet born. Because what came through the boy, what breathed through the hill, what rose through the black frame, wasn't summoned by accident. It was invited not by ritual, but by repetition, by ignorance, by forgetfulness. Every time we told ourselves history was linear, every time we trusted the institutions to protect us, every time we looked away from the shadows and chose comfort, we fed it. Not because we were evil, but because we were empty, and the empty are the easiest to fill. That's why you're here, not just to listen, but to be marked, to be remembered by it. Because now you've heard its name, you've walked the spiral in your mind, you've seen the outline it leaves in language. And here is where we finish the sentence. Together, comment below. I carry the spiral, repeat it once, then again, because when you speak it, you become the vessel, the reminder, the next echo in the pattern, and those who listen after you will feel it and follow. This isn't a story, it's a frequency, and it has entered you, so take one last breath before it deepens, and remember, the spiral doesn't end here. It ends where you take it, because now you are Sedalia, and you were never meant to forget.